Hey everyone, this is Jimmy Cook, Director of Production and Publishing for Vineyard Worship UK and Ireland. We release new music on the first Friday of every month. The Hidden Place is Vineyard Worship's monthly single for September 2020. This song explores the deep work of formation and transformation that can only happen in the hidden place with God. The record features renowned Vineyard Worship leader Samuel Lane, whose powerful vocals lift the beautiful lyrical landscape to another level of meaning and personal experience.
In the hidden place, I can be myself, I'm safe, and I feel no shame. I'm secure in your embrace, all the striving ends. I don't have to bear the in the hidden place where you speak to me. I hear you calling out my name, calling out my name. I'm ready to follow you in faith, follow you in faith. I hear you calling out my name, calling out my name. And I'm ready to follow you in faith, to follow you in faith. Yes, have your way. God, have your way.
Check out The Hidden Place and all of our singles wherever you listen to music.
You know, I'm always so fascinated by the fact that so many cultures around the world have some form of a stuffed fried bread, whether it's an empanada, a Cornish pasty, a samosa, even a spring roll to a certain extent. There's something about our human nature that says, stuff it and fry it.
Yes.
You know, and then for me, as a Christian, I'm like, there's something about that God's like, yeah, right, I made that. I put that in you. Those sorts of things give me hope that, like, if we could interact with each other on a food level and exchange ideas or see how similar we are, I think it all points to, oh, that's because one person made us. We're all family, you know, and so his mark is on each of us.
You're listening to the Ferment podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. Today's guest is Food Network chef Aarti Sequeira.
What up, Aarti? Welcome to the Ferment podcast.
It's a long time coming, Mr. Adam.
Well, listen, this is all because we have a mutual friend, Casey Coram. That's it.
Yes. And Casey Coram, I remember he came and led worship at our little church plot in LA. And he started singing and I was like, how does that voice come out of that man?
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It has this like soul to it, you know, that you don't think is going to come out of this like SoCal looking dude.
That's
and
right.
And the soul comes out of it. And I was like, just teach me your ways, Casey Coram. And then he told me about this podcast.
That's right.
I'm very excited to be on it.
Well, I'm super stoked because I've never actually talked to a Food Network star. What the heck?
Well, may this be the beginning of many for you.
That's right. I just love that. Well, I'm so stoked that you're here because you come highly recommended from Casey, but then also because I've been doing a little digging, and your background seems it's just so different and so cool. And I'm stoked to talk to you about some of the things that have happened in your life and how you are, who you are, and where you got to where you're at. Is that okay?
I'm a mixed up ball of different things for sure.
Well, let's start maybe, way back, way before Food Network or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about your growing up. Talk to me about your family and where you grew up, how you grew up. What was the atmosphere of your family and your early childhood?
That's a good question. What was the atmosphere of your family? That goes straight into it.
That's right.
So I like that. I don't like small talk. This is good. So when my mother was pregnant with me, my parents were married. They had already moved to Dubai. So they're Indian. They had moved to Dubai for a better world, a better life. So we are from the Portuguese portion of India, which is why my last name is Sequeira, which I guess in Portuguese you'd say Sequeira. So faith and religion, probably more accurately, religion was always a big part of our lives. And it's a big part of everybody's life, I think, in India, because who you worship really designates who you hang out with, what you eat, what holidays you celebrate. Although in India, we kind of celebrate everything, but it's really a huge identifier. And so for us, being Catholics in a country that's majority Hindu and Muslim means that we're a pretty tight clan, because we're the ones that drink the whiskey, eat the piggies, eat the cows.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, we are free in that way. And so religion and food were always huge parts of my life, both because it's just sort of inherent to our community, but also because we were separated from our community. We had moved to Dubai. And so what we ate and how we worshipped, whom we worshipped, was a way of connecting with our family back home. So I always say that, when we were drinking our afternoon tea at 4:00 and having a little nibble, we knew a couple of hours, before us, our cousins had done the same thing. You know what I mean? With the time difference and stuff. And on Easter, when we had sarpatel, which is this pork curry that has liver, it has liver and pork fat and everything in it. We knew that, our family back in Bangalore was having the same thing. So that was such a huge part of my life.
Okay, so part of what I'm hearing in your story already is that your story is a story of combination and mixture and a collision of cultures. Because you're going from India to Dubai. You're going from to both of these places are extremely diverse in terms of religious expression and all these kinds of things. And then there's your family kind of sitting right in the middle of it. So I would assume that gives a certain kind of texture to your home.
Yeah, there's a slipperiness, and I think that's why when I was growing up, there was one Catholic church in Dubai, and it was St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church. Had to get the Roman in there. And, we would go every Sunday, and we'd go for every high holiday. And is that what they call it in Catholicism? I just put a little Jewish stuff in there. But every big day, every, sacred day, we went for all of those things. And, grew up with my dad wearing a Mary medal around his chest. And, during times of trouble, we would say the rosary together as a family. And so that was such a huge part of it. But I also was sent, and my sisters too, to a British-run school in Dubai. And so that was even more doors opened there, because suddenly, my best friend was from Italy, or I had a friend from Madagascar, or friends from Australia. I mean, I had people really from all over the world in my childhood. And I'm so grateful for that, because I think it gives you this slipperiness, this ability, this flexibility to communicate with anybody and understand Like I'll watch my husband sometimes talk to people who are from a different country or have difficulty with the language. And I was like, you don't know what words to hit in order to get through. And it's not his fault, you know. There's just something that there's just this like knee-jerk knowledge that you get from growing up in a place like Dubai.
You know, and it occurs to me that those are skills that are always in season. But my goodness, what skills to have now? What great skills to have on board, you know, in this current day and age and in this current cultural moment.
Yeah, I think the thing I've always appreciated about food is that because it is such an intimate exchange, that no matter what your difference is, you can usually start there. And then once you've eaten some food and you've kind of dissolved the barrier a little bit, then you're actually able to hear each other. You know, I think it's really hard to break bread with someone and then, well, I don't know, the Real Housewives of New Jersey have showed me differently, but then flip the table.
You're too good.
But that's my hope is that, you know, that if I even have a cup of tea with somebody, that, you know, if there's a hard discussion that needs to be had, that in some way we've kind of prepped the canvas and now we can actually throw some paint on there.
Well, I want to dive into the very thing you're talking about right now, but maybe I want to go one step back before we do that, because I think you're hitting on maybe the heart of the conversation here. But I want to just prep people. You are deeply involved in what I would call hospitality. You're a food person. Yeah. This is your life. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that some of it is, you know, originating from the story that you've already told. Indian-born, Dubai, collision of cultures, unique and great things always happen in those kinds of spaces, especially with food. But talk to me about when you became awake to food, or when you were not just awake, but you were like pursuing it. You're like, this is who I am. There's something about who I am that expresses itself through food. Talk to me about that.
And that was a watershed moment, because I think until then, which was somewhere in my 20s, all I'd ever want, I wouldn't have said that my life was hospitality. I would have said my life was news, because I grew up during the Gulf War, and that's the first time that I saw real reporting and journalism. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And so, you know, I went to university for journalism. I worked at CNN for, you know, a number of years. And then when I got married, I moved to LA, which is where my husband was. And I didn't have a job. And that was when food took a huge sort of, it took the driver's seat, because, you know, I am an emotional eater, and I'm working on it. But in those times where I was really questioning my purpose and my self-worth and all of those things, I would turn to the kitchen. And I didn't know what I was doing really, but in retrospect, I was taking ugly chaos, like a hairy celery root. It's an ugly thing. But if you peel it and you prep it and you dress it and you love it, it suddenly turns into this gorgeous salad, you know, that I can't eat enough of. And so that was when food moved into the driver's seat. And I thought, well, I really just can't get enough of this. And I'm really grateful that the internet wasn't as big then as it is now. And phones were not as big then as they were now, because I could so easily see myself just drowning my sorrows on Instagram and just scrolling, numbing. But back then it was like, you got to pick up something to do. Otherwise you're just going to sit there and watch TV. And I was like, I can't be that person that gets into soap operas, because then I'm done.
You're funny.
It was real though, you know. I just know who I am. You know, I have that addictive personality. It's going to be trouble. So that was when food took over. And at that point, I was watching a lot of Food Network. I was watching every PBS cooking show I could find. My friend had given me the joy of cooking, and food had always been a part of my life. Like I had a huge, big, one of those big diaries, like day diaries. And I took after my mom, and I would write down recipes in there that worked. She has bunches of those. And so I would pull that out and write things in there. And so that was when my husband was like, this is really something. And so he got me a gift certificate to a cooking school in the neighborhood. It was a semi-professional thing. And it just taught me soup to nuts how to cook, the real sort of basics and science of it. And that was the first time that I thought, hey, I'm like good at this. And I think I'd like to take a crack at this.
Wow.
For money.
I love that.
And that's when it started.
Well, I guess I have two questions there. Number one would be just hearing your story, and you were talking about being immersed in this new place, beginning to dip your toes into food in a new way, and also just your family history. I'd be interested in who are your heroes in food? Who are your inspirations in food? Is it mom? I'm hearing like maybe mom. But maybe there's some other people. And then, of course, there's LA, which is everything, right? Yeah,
it was everything. It was definitely mom. It still is mom. Although I will say that as the world changes, there just seems to be more. I just seem to be discovering more and more people. And so is she, by the way. I mean, she's constantly sending me, have you seen this recipe? She'll send me videos on Instagram in my DMs. It's not like, hi, how are you? It's like 6 different recipes, But yeah, I think my mother is my chief inspiration because she cooks so instinctually, and even if I follow her recipe, oh, sorry, there's a fight happening.
There's good.
I have 2 kids, everybody.
It's all good.
So she cooks so instinctually, but she's also trained. She has a hospitality degree. So I grew up with her cooking, not just Indian food, but all over food. She had, in Australia, there's a magazine called Australia Women's Weekly, and they would put out these recipe books, and they were like, 50 pages long. And so she would order one every couple of months. And we had to have a shelf put into our pantry just so she could put all of the recipe books up there. And I still remember going, in the afternoon when there was sort of a dip and not that much to do, just going in there and thumbing through those cookbooks. So it was always there in the back of my mind. And the fact that she cooked the way that she did has influenced me like no other.
Yeah. Your story reminds me of a story from my own life a couple years ago. I live here in Kentucky. This is where I grew up. There's a certain kind of, I would call Appalachian cuisine that is, it's a thing here. We call it country cooking, and you can only really get it here. Like if you're from the American South, you know what I'm talking about. And then you go other places and they try to reproduce it, but it's not the thing. Anyway, my mom is an accidental queen of this stuff. Like she knows how to do this. Wow. And it occurred to me a few years ago, probably 6 or 8 years ago, coming up on Thanksgiving, I need to learn how to make some of this stuff, because if I don't, then on the day my mother dies, all of this familial story that we tell with food, it dies with her. And so my sister and I, or my wife and I, we'd go over to mom's house and we'd say, hey mom, how do you make this? And then all of a sudden she gets a few things out and she just starts going to town. There's no recipe. It's like, well, you just, you get a green bowl and it's like, wait, stop. How much did you put in there? And what are we doing right now? And how do you do this? Yeah. And then I would try to reproduce it and it was not right. And I would go back and yeah.
It's all those tiny things because it's so instinctual to your mom and my mom. They don't even know to tell you to do those things because it just naturally flows out of them. And that's habit. I mean, I remember making the same lentil dish that my mom, that we had so much growing up. And I was like, Mom, listen, now I made the recipe the same way that you told me. And it did not come out the same. And she was like, Aru, she was like, if you had been making it for 60 years, then it would come out that way, and that there is something to that I hope that we don't lose, because right now I feel like most of us are trying to make something new at least a couple times a week, just because you see something online or on TV. And that's good. But there is something to making that same dish every week for 60 years that will do something, do something to you. It'll do something to that dish. And that's in this time when we're so used to having things instantly and shortcutting it and Amazon Prime and all of that stuff. That is what romances me about food, is that you can't rush it.
That's right.
You can't.
Well,
There's no way to.
My own mother, she makes these fried pork chops and these fried potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not fair. Like, I know how to do it. I have done it. I continue to do it. It is not the same. And then when my mother, who lives in town with us, she will invite my family over and my sister as well. And we'll go over. And if she's got those going, like my kids they go absolutely bananas. They're like, this
really?
Is, yeah. But it's the same story. It's like my mother's doing the same thing your mom is. It's instinctual cooking and there's decades in it. And it's.
Well, and it's also interesting because I remember the little brown ceramic mug that my mom would use to measure the rice. You know what I mean? And it sat in this huge bin of rice and it was always that mug. And so, I should ask her, what was it like when you moved into a kitchen where that mug did not exist anymore? How does that change the way you cook? And I would ask your mom the same thing. And what happens if she doesn't have the green bowl?
That's right.
What happens if she doesn't have that cast iron skillet that she's had for a billion years?
That's the thing.
And that would be part of it for you, is when you make your pork chops, you're not making it in the skillet that she's made it in for 60 years.
No, that's it.
All of these things, they add up and they seem like really inconsequential things. But when they're all rounded up together, it's the difference between sort of a B+ and an A quadrillion star dish.
Agree. Same.
Yeah. Same. I know.
Same. Well, let's go back to what we were talking about a minute ago, because you started to touch on really what I was hearing anyway, are really the spiritual dynamics of food.
Yeah.
The way that hospitality opens people to something more, to the transcendent.
Yeah. Well, you think about one of the longest lasting conflicts on the planet, right? Between Israel and Palestine. And then you look at the food, and it is pretty much the same. Because they are, they come from the same line or similar lines, depending on how you interpret things. And that always astounds me. I'm like, you guys, you eat the same food. Like, how are you not, how is this still happening? And I remember one time watching a video about hummus and how, these guys would go to every weekend. They were in Tel Aviv, I think, and they would go to this one vendor and get their hummus. When they asked the hummus guy, how do you make your hummus? He goes, oh, well, I have to go to the other side, to the Palestinian side, to get the tahini. And I was like, look, you guys, it's woven into the way that, and that is just one conflict, right?
Yes.
India and Pakistan, same thing. Who makes the better biryani? Who cares? You both make biryani.
That's right.
I was reading this book called Curry, which I was like, pick a better title. But the thing that I liked about it is that, especially in India, we can get very caught up in the most authentic way to do things. And this is the authentic recipe, and please don't stray from the recipe. And then when you read this history of some of the foods that we feel are like, when we erupted out of the soil, we came with this recipe, in our bones.
Yes.
You find out, well, actually, no, that came from Iran.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yeah. So like biryani came from Iran. Like the way that we work with rice, we learned so much from the Iranians, and they learned from us too. That's just one aspect of food that I think is so fascinating and so important. And it can really sort of put you in your place when you start to get a little haughty about, well, this is just how we do things. Like, well, do you really know how you do things?
That's right.
Because I think if you dug a little deeper, maybe you would understand that, things are always in movement, and they should always be in movement,
Well, and part of what I hear you saying there is, Palestinians and Jews, Pakistan and India, different, maybe national stories, but if you dig down into the food culture, it's the same. And maybe there's something there where we're actually telling each other different stories when the truth is maybe we have a foundational story underneath that we could root ourselves into, or maybe there's some commonality in food that could bring about a bigger discussion. Maybe there's something in the humility of what we eat that could percolate up into something like transcendence or agreement of all things.
Yeah. I think so. And I think, I'm always so fascinated by the fact that so many cultures around the world have some form of a stuffed fried bread, whether it's an empanada, a Cornish pasty, a samosa, even a spring roll to a certain extent. There's something about our human nature that says, stuff it and fry it.
Yes.
And then for me as a Christian, I'm like, there's something about that God's like, yeah, right. I made that. I put that in you, and so those sorts of things give me hope that like, if we could if we could interact with each other on a food level and just exchange ideas or see how similar we are, I think it all points to, that's because one person made us. We're all family, and so his mark is on each of us.
Amen.
And I just like, that gives me chills when I think about that.
No, I love that. I love that. And the other thing that you're reminding me of, Aarti, is that I'm just thinking of the Gospels right now, because you just in some ways retold the gospel story.
No.
In kind of a different way, Okay. He's put his mark on us. Like we have this, there's something about human nature that says, stuff it and fry it. I just love that. That may be the new catchphrase for our podcast. I don't know. But you're right. It speaks of God, right? It speaks of there's something else going on here. There's some sort of human inclination. And we have this reflex, this impulse. But while you were telling that story, I just couldn't help but think about all the moments in the Gospels where Jesus is doing his best moves around a table. Like on the road to Emmaus, the two guys who don't recognize Jesus when he's with them, telling them about the Bible, they become aware of who he is when he breaks the bread in their house at the table. Like that, what? Get out of here. Get out of. It's like there's something here for us. And not only that, but like I'm thinking of the Syrophoenician woman in the Gospels as well, who's like, basically that's gospel speak for not a Jew, the wrong person. And it's in one of the Gospels, like Jesus has gone away with his disciples and he's basically on vacation, and the Syrophoenician woman comes in and says to Jesus, right in the middle of everything, hey, why don't you heal my daughter? And Jesus gives her this pretty rude answer. Like he says to her, well, it's not right to throw the children's bread to the dogs, which is as rude as it gets. It sounds rude. It's a hard moment. And then the woman comes back to him and says, yeah, but even the dogs get the crumbs that fall from the table. And it's like, and Jesus is like, for an answer like that, what in the world? Your daughter's healed. And there's some kind of connection here with like healing, food, tables, revelation, knowing, transcendence. I'm running out of words, but it's connected to this thing you're talking about.
Yeah, it's magic. I mean, I remember one time I was doing an Instagram thing, and I was like, I'm about to say something, and if your kids are around, you maybe shouldn't let them hear this.
I like where this is going already.
I know. So warning, Ferment listeners.
Yes.
But yeah, I think there's something so intimate about eating with someone, because I think it's more intimate than sex, because especially if you're the person that made the food, right? You made the food with your own hands, and now that food is going into that person's body to places you can't touch.
That's right.
That is like, I mean, you are getting on the inside of someone in a way that nothing else can, not even sex.
Yes.
So, and we think of that as the most intimate thing that we can do, So there is something, and my favorite moment is when Jesus grills fish for the disciples after he comes back, right? He's sitting on the shore and he's grilling fish. And I was like, Jesus cooked? I was like, did you salt bay that?
Yes.
You know, did you put a little lemon on it?
Yes.
There is definitely something about, you know, the fact that he likened his body to bread and his blood to wine, the fact that he talks about heaven as being a feast, the fact that, you know, the Last Supper was the Last Supper. That was how he wanted to spend his last moments with his people. When you think about it that way, you can never, ever say to someone again, hey, you want to go grab a bite? Oh, kills me every time because I'm like, no, this is not what it is, you know? I remember watching a video of a French woman, and she was sharing her tips for, you know, feeling like being skinny like a French woman, right? And she said, one of the things she said was, I sit down to eat my meals at lunch, and lunch is the hardest, I think. I sit down and I eat my meals. I don't eat it on the counter. I don't eat it over the stove. I don't eat while I'm driving. I don't do anything else. I just sit there and I eat. And I was like, dang, I need to do that, because I think it slows you down and it gets you back in touch with that rhythm. Who made this food? Where did this food come from? You know, what does it do for my body? Why? I think all of those questions, if you have the presence of mind to ask them while you're eating, are very healing for your spirit.
Oh, amen. Amen.
Yeah.
It also reminds me of, because you mentioned resurrection a moment ago. When Jesus shows up to the disciples, and, you know, the doors are locked, by the way, and Jesus appears. He appears.
I love that.
Apparently he can do that. But one of the very cool parts of the story in the Gospel of John is he asked the guys, you got anything to eat? You got any fish? Which is to say that eating and drinking go into the eschaton. Like, resurrection life will not be divorced from this. Like, the good stuff now will be the good stuff then.
Yeah. I mean, I can't wait.
Same.
I can't wait, you know.
Same.
I was talking to someone the other day about, you know, how they say you're only using like 6% of your brain or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm like, that other 94 is going to be on fire when we go up there, you know, because then we'll taste things we've never tasted. We'll drink things we've never had and see things we've never seen. And it reminded me of, I don't know if you've seen these videos on Instagram of the groom who gets given a pair of glasses by his bride and he's colorblind.
Those are...
Oh my gosh, I just start weeping.
Yes.
Weeping. And when the groom says to the bride, you see this all the time?
Yeah.
You know, and he just starts weeping, and I'm like, that's what it's going to be like.
Yes.
You know, that's what it's going to be like. And as someone who is an eater, a professional eater for reals, like, I just can't even imagine.
Hi everybody, this is Naomi Latta with the Vineyard School of Worship, and I would like to personally invite you to Thrive, an all-ages worship leader training happening online this October. Each session is designed to equip worship leaders serving their local church and is soaked in kingdom values and practice, brought to you by instructors from all around the world. We invite you to join us and challenge you to grow with us as we learn how we as worship leaders can become non-anxious presences both on and off the stage. Thrive consists of 6 sessions in October, all 2 hours each. You can attend live and participate in live discussions, or you can choose to audit the course and learn at your own pace. We also offer add-ons if you are interested in songwriting coaching, spiritual direction, and more. Visit vsow.org to register and use the code Ferment15 for 15% off your registration. This training is all ages, so invite yourself, invite your friends, invite your youth group worship team, and we can't wait to see you in October.
Let me bring it back down to earth here for a second, because you just used the phrase professional eater. And I know you're being funny, but I know what you mean. But that ties into a question that I had, and I actually wrote this down.
Yeah.
When you go out to eat, can you turn off the internal critic?
No.
I knew it because, yes, I get that. I totally get that.
Oh, it's hard. I mean, it depends on the venue.
Yes. Talk to me about that.
If I go to someone's house and they've made me a meal and their intention is that I'm sharing my heart with you and this is my hospitality, then it's like a boop. It's like it's on life support. I don't do it. But if I go to a restaurant and there's any degree of snootiness in the preparation or the presentation of the food, then it's like boop, boop, boop. It's like my heart is beating and I just can't help it.
I get it.
And and I don't know whether it was as strong a muscle before I started judging. So I started off as, I had a YouTube cooking show, and then I competed on Food Network Star, and then I won, and then I got my own cooking show. And there was a lot of self-judgment going on in that for sure. And I read every negative comment. If you wrote a negative comment, I read it. And so, because that's how I fix it. That's how I adjust. Then when I became a judge, I felt, well, now who am I? And I remember Guy saying, because Guy's Grocery Games, I think, was the first show I ever was a judge on. And he was like, you have every right to be here. He goes, you can taste things better than a lot of people I know. You have every right to be here, so stop it. I was like, okay. And now I've been doing it for so many years that I can't help it. When I go out to eat, I do taste things and I'm immediately like, well, a little more salt here would be great. If they maybe fried the shrimp instead of poaching it. I just can't help it.
I get it.
But the cool thing is that I'm realizing, well, I could just do that at home now. Like sometimes when I go to a restaurant, someone has such a great idea of a dish, but they don't know how to execute it. And the thing is, like, now I know how to execute it. I wouldn't have had that idea, believe for you, but guess what? I'm going home and making it.
That's right.
That's it.
Right. That's how creativity works as well, right? Because sometimes someone's performance, whatever that is, musical performance, artistic performance, dish, things they cook, things they make, wines they make, it gives us ideas that we never would have had before. And it might inspire us to a thing that we couldn't have imagined without the experience of them presenting whatever it is they present.
Yeah, and that was what was so helpful to me about that curry book that I was reading, is this idea that there's no original recipe. Or I would say there are very few original recipes, especially at this point in 2020. We're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just adjusting it by degrees. And so I would put a lot of pressure on myself to come up with these brand new ideas of recipes. And I do think that there are chefs out there who do that. And to me, they're very intellectual cooks. And my husband is a bit of an intellectual cook. He's a creator and an actor, an idea maker. And so he'll come up with this idea of a dish. And I'm like, even last night I had made something. And he was like, it would be really good if you took Rice Krispies and you put them in brown butter and then you sprinkle them over the top. And I was like, okay, I know what you're saying, but I'm trying to think of a version of that makes sense to the story of this dish. And then he looked at me and I was like, I know, it's super pretentious, but there's a story in this dish and Rice Krispies doesn't make sense in it.
Oh, too good. I know that one time, my wife and I, we were at a restaurant that will go unnamed. It was maybe a little famous, one of those kind of places. Fun. But when we left, I couldn't help but feeling that some of the food was more tortured than, I'll use your word, storyfied, The embodiment of some particular story. It felt flexy to me.
Yeah. That happens.
Yeah, which is fun. It's fun, but it's not my favorite.
Well, it's hard because I think there are aspects of art that are, it makes sense when it's flexy. Right? It makes sense and it's fine and it's its own thing. Food, because comes from the hearth and from mothers cooking for their children and fathers cooking for their children and grandparents cooking. There is something so, I just come back to that same word, so heart-centered and so intimate that comes out of that. So sometimes when food doesn't come from that same place, it doesn't feel satisfying. I've been to meals like that at restaurants where we saved up to go. And then we left and we all went and got a roast beef sandwich afterwards.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
And I don't think that was just because, you know, the portions were small. I think it was because we were missing that. We were missing someone who loved making these roast beef sandwiches, making them for us.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I mean, I think there's something there. I was thinking about your question about, does the critic ever turn off? And I was thinking about it in terms of music, because at the church plant that my husband and I helped, you know, we were part of the team, and Casey came and led us. And he was like, why aren't you leading this? And I was like, because I don't want to. And I don't think I'm good enough, you know? And I was like, my musical ability is great for this purpose right here. But my musical ability is not where it needs to be for like a professional level, and definitely not in a leadership level. And I think there's something about that with cooking too. Like, what's the venue in which it's happening? So there, Casey, I've never forgotten.
There you go. I do love that, though. There's a lot of wisdom there. The venue does speak to what's appropriate or what's
Right.
allowed. The space is telling a kind of story as well.
Yeah.
Love
And
that.
who you're cooking for too, you know. I think you know, when I try to teach kids about food, I speak very differently than when I try to teach grown-ups about food. And I think the same thing happens when you actually cook the food too, is, you know, you're not necessarily making filet mignon for a crowd that will just be like, it's just a dry piece of steak. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I'll give you a ribeye.
Well, let's shift gears here again just for a moment. Obviously, our whole conversation has been, I think, steeped in spiritual notes, and the conversation has centered around Jesus in so many ways. But I would love it if you would just tell us about your life now with faith and your life now with Jesus. What does it look like now? Because you're someone who's made food into their career. You're doing it at like the top levels in this particular way, like this place where food and media mix and meet. And so you're someone who's on TV, you're in front of cameras, you're doing that for a lot of people. And I'm interested in how maybe the life of faith plays in those spaces.
So, you know, I grew up Catholic, but I didn't really hold hands with Jesus until I was in my 20s. You know, I just was sort of like, oh, he's up there and I'm down here and I don't even know if this is real. So to come in your 20s, I think is such a great time, because you think you know everything, and you read it, and then you come crashing down and you're like, I know nothing. And I feel like I have that over and over and over again. Now I'm 42, just like you, and I have two little girls. I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. And so frankly, I don't get, you know, the luxury of quiet time every morning and Bible study and all this. And I thought that there was something wrong with me until I heard someone, like an older woman, like in her 60s. She was like, no, that's not for you right now. That's okay. It literally is not possible. So I just got back. I've been shooting for 3 weeks in Southern California. And so that felt like a vacation, because I had no one coming and waking me up in the middle of the night. I had no one screaming for me to wipe their butt. Like, it just was just me. And I found myself actually kind of losing my mind a little bit, because it was just too many thoughts and all the quiet in the world for them to replicate. And so I did find myself praying a lot more and spending a lot more time with the Lord. And what I found recently is, first of all, when I walk on set, I always pray before I walk on set. And my prayer is always that he would shine through every pore of my body, and that the Holy Spirit would hang heavy. You know, like how the mist hung over the Garden of Eden, that the Holy Spirit would hang heavy in that room, and people would feel this crazy joy and freedom, and they would wonder where that came from. And maybe in some way, if that led to a conversation with me, great. But maybe if it leads to a conversation with someone else, actually even better, because I always feel like I'm inadequate to answer questions. So that's one way that it's a huge part of my life now. And I bring it to set every time for me and for everybody else, because this whole career was such a surprise and such a miracle and such a came out of left field kind of thing that I feel responsible. You know, I was thinking about this idea of like how people are like, well, I have a gift for public speaking, or I have a gift for playing piano. And that gift is not yours. A gift is something that was given to you. And the way that God gives gifts is, I give you this gift for my purposes. So you can't leave it under a basket. And I always felt like if I let my gift shine too much, or if I was too proud of it, then it would lead to arrogance. And I'm starting to let that go. And so this most recent time on set, I just let it fly, and it felt so good, and it lifted people up, you know, and that then gifted me again with joy. So it was just this sort of water wheel that just kept going and going. I don't know if that makes any sense.
That makes a ton of sense. And I just want to reflect a couple things you said, just so that everybody can kind of gather around it, because you said a couple things there I think that were really, really important. One had to do with stations of life. You know, You're 42, you've got a career, you have 2 little kids. And so maybe you don't read the Bible every morning. And then the older lady told you, yeah, duh, that's okay. People need to know that there are seasons in life. And it isn't always just spring. Sometimes it's like summertime when you got to work and cultivate the field, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I always feel like, well, if I haven't put in the work, which is sort of this, you know, psychological term for my friends who, I have friends who are really deeply steeped in psychology and psychiatry, and they're always talking about doing the work. And I think that's kind of worked its way into my system too. And so I'm like, if I haven't done the work, then when I really need God, is he going to come through because I haven't put in the work? I haven't fed the meter. And that's what he keeps showing me over and over again. It's like, dude, I don't work like that. You're my baby. I'm always going to be there for you, you know? And every time he does that, I'm just in tears, like sobbing in my trailer. Like, I can't believe you showed up for me this way.
Yes.
You know, when I haven't put in the work. So I'm starting, even in talking to you right now, I'm starting to realize I need to let that go from my thinking, because that's not God's economy.
No, it's not. I mean, that's more in line with, it's fairly Darwinian. If we're just right down to it, it's fairly Darwinian. It's fairly like extreme capitalistic, you know, you get what you deserve, Aarti.
Right.
When you didn't do it, now you're on your own. Mm-hmm. And the gospel of the kingdom of heaven is that precisely when you didn't do it, couldn't do it, maybe didn't even want to do it, Jesus did it for you.
Right.
And we'll keep doing it for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm preaching.
And I'm just like that. Yes, you are. Yes, I'm getting chills.
Too fun.
I'm like tearing up a little bit. I'm like, yes, keep going.
Too fun.
It's true.
It's
true. And it's beautiful, you know, and I think when you can share that with people who, that's the thing is, you know, that whole thing about Jesus was a man of constant sorrow. And I think that's because, you know, he looked around, he saw all these people struggling with things that they didn't need to struggle with. There are things that we are meant to struggle with. I do believe that there is a purpose for suffering, but they were struggling with all this unnecessary stuff, you know? And I was like, if you would just let that go, you would feel so much freedom. And then you can come on over and deal with this other stuff. And even that stuff you deal with in his presence. And he pulls the cart along for you.
That's right. And isn't that part of the Christian message? It's not just that we avoid suffering. I mean, the Christian message is just to what you said. We're going to get suffering, but the good news is we don't have to suffer alone. Jesus will be with us, and no one suffers anything that Jesus hasn't already experienced in his own life. We have a God who knows. That's the Christian message.
Yeah. So the 2 nights ago, we were at my in-laws' house, and my littlest decided to go walking along like a wood pile barefoot. And then she comes running in the house and she says, I have a splinter. And of course, it's the tiniest little splinter, but she has these really baby soft feet. And so then my husband's like, well, nothing doing. We've got to get it out. And she just starts crying. And he's trying and it didn't come out. And so I held her and she was like, oh God. And I was like, that's a good idea. We should pray about it. She was like, no. Why does God let things like this happen to us, Mama?
Oh.
Why did he let this happen to me? And I was like, you're 4 years old and you're asking one of the biggest questions of life.
The question. You're having existential pain. It's the story of my life. It was so
hard. And I was like, I know. And I was like, okay, let me take you. Remember the story of Adam and Eve in the garden, honey? And it was so often I find that when I'm talking to my children about God, I'm preaching it back to myself because I need it just the way that, I need it 3 times the amount that they need it. I found that having children has been such a gift in that way,
That's right. Well, Aarti, here's what I want to do. I want to do some quick hitters, and then I'll ask you one more question. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah.
All right, quick hitters. Street food or fine dining?
Street food.
Healthy or comfort food?
Healthy.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm in this new world of I need to treat my body well.
Okay. I like that. Protein or side dishes?
Side dishes.
I agree.
Love them.
Oftentimes.
I know. They're the best.
Oh, man. Sometimes that's it.
Yeah.
Host or to be hosted?
Host.
Love that. Okay, last one.
I love it.
Last one. And then this gets framed a little bit morbid, but this is the game that my family and I play. It's called Execution Meal.
Okay.
Yeah, you know how if you're in prison and if you're on death row, I mean, it's a little bit morbid. But
I'm there with you. Don't worry about it.
Before you're capitally punished, you get to eat whatever you want. If you're in and this is it, and they're going to give you one last meal, what are you going out on?
Oh man. It would probably be my mum's lentils, that same dal that I was telling you about earlier, because no one can make it like her. With this very particular vegetable that you can only get in my hometown that's a little sour. Oh my God, it's so good. So those lentils, some rice, papad, which is a fried chickpea wafer type of thing, and thenlis, which is another kind of little vegetable you can only find in India. I would just go straight Indian, vegetarian, made by my mama, and then I'm ready to go.
There you go. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, me too. Now I want it.
Yeah, I should have framed that as Last Supper. I didn't have to go execution meal. It's just now occurring to me right now.
No, it's okay, because it really put me in that place of what? Okay, but this is the difference, and this is why I think it's important that you go morbid, Adam.
Okay, tell me.
Yeah, just to yes and you.
Yes.
Because if it's your last meal and you're about to be executed, it puts you in a very particular frame of mind, which is you need comfort. You're nostalgic.
Yeah.
Those are things that you crave in a very different way.
Yeah.
Last Supper before, I don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
That doesn't have that same.
Yeah, it doesn't have the same gravity, right?
Yeah, I mean, it probably did for Jesus, but
maybe.
It was his death row meal.
That's exactly same.
Yes.
Same.
Yes, same. Okay. Same. Yeah, so same.
Same. Yeah. My just so you know, I have to just interject my own story here for a second.
Yeah.
My execution meal: raw oysters and white wine from France, Chablis.
Wow.
Let's just
what warm water oysters or cold water oysters?
Let's go. It's got to be cold water, like Washington oysters.
Yes, thank you.
The little ones? The little guy. I want like 2-3 dozen Washington oysters, bottle of white French wine on ice. I'm going to smash all of it, throw the switch.
Yeah. Now I'm changing my mind. See, that's more celebratory.
It is. That's kind of the thing. Yeah. Like so many happy moments are like right there. And there's just something about the salt brine ocean and white French wine. It is a match made in the kingdom.
I know. It is. It is made in the kingdom.
It is.
Because who, we always talk about this. Who cracked that open and said, I'm going to put that in my mouth?
Tell me about it. Tell me about it.
I mean, unless you were inspired by the Holy Spirit, I don't understand why you'd ever put that in your mouth.
And just to yes and that, I didn't buy the idea of food and wine pairings. You know, I would read these articles and they would be like, well, you need this with this. And yes, there are rules. And yes, the rules are made to be broken and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But I never really got it until I did. And one of my big aha moments was raw oysters and white wine. And I was just dumbfounded. Raw oysters and Chablis, Chardonnay, that's just, give it to me.
Oh, now I want it. You know, that Raleigh has a lot of oysters, and they're good, but man, those little cold water oysters they're a whole different thing.
You and I agree. Okay, last question.
Everybody in the South's going to come at us, but that's okay.
That's fine. Send them my way.
Come on, because
come at me.
We know what our death row meal is already. So come on.
Okay, Aarti, last question, and this is the question that everybody is getting at the end of the podcast this season. It's a big one.
All right, I'm ready.
Aarti, what's the dream of your heart?
Oh no! What's the worst question?
What's the dream you're carrying?
Okay, so the reason that I'm humming and hawing about this is that I felt like I stopped dreaming a long time ago because I had a dream, you know, that I would be a journalist and international correspondent like Christiane Amanpour. And then when my career at CNN ended, I felt like that dream died. And along with it, the bravery to dream, because dreaming, when the dream doesn't come true, it hurts a lot, you know? And so I stopped. And in a way, the upside of that is everything that happened after that, this career, my children, the whole thing has been beyond anything I could have dreamt of. So a little part of me has felt like, hey, that's positive feedback. Just keep doing what you're doing. But I also feel like I'm at the point now where I don't think I'm going to get to the next level unless I have the courage to dream and go for it, you know? So I think my dream is just to have an empire, but the empire is kingdom-minded, meaning we serve a servant king. So my empire would be servant-minded. You know what I mean? So everything that I would make, put out, produce, all of that would be with that mindset of like, how can I serve you? And how can I help you serve others? I think that's kind of where I'm going. But apart from that, I mean, I want to be able to provide for my children and for my parents and my husband and myself. And I keep it kind of simple for now.
It's beautiful.
I hope so.
Beautiful.
In those moments where I have a little Bible study, I feel like I get these very, very important messages coming through. And so I'm like, okay, they may be few, but I think that they're jam-packed. And so I need to hold on to those, you know?
Amen. Well, Aarti, thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Adam. This is so much fun.
So good.
Yeah, I love that we went straight to the meat of things.
Oh, look, man, there's no fluff here. We go straight into the heart. I love it. We go straight into the heart.
Unless it's marshmallow fluff, which I'm a big fan of.
Listen, how are you not going to have some of that?
How are you not going to have a fluffernutter in your life? That also might go on that execution meal. Hello?
Well, okay, we're still rolling. Tell me what that is. I've never even heard of that.
Sweet, sweet Adam. You take yourself 2 pieces. I discovered a pecan tree in our backyard, and I just saw the squirrel with a pecan in its mouth. People warn me.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I got distracted.
Tell me what this is.
Okay, my Adam, you're going to take yourself 2 pieces of white bread.
Yes.
You're going to slather one side with peanut butter. I like it crunchy.
Yes.
Salted.
Yes.
And then on the other side, you're going to slather it with marshmallow fluff.
Yes.
And then you're going to squish them together, and you're going to take a gigantic bite and wash it down with some cold milk. And it's not quite oysters and chablis, but it's at least like something you can have. It'll come close.
Hey, look, it's Wednesday.
It'll come close.
It's Wednesday. Killer.
It's definitely. It's Wednesday heaven.
That's right. Perfect. Hey, internet high fives?
Done.
Boom.
Hi everyone, this is Melissa Keller, Events Director for Vineyard Worship. If you've been enjoying the podcast, I've got a couple of ways you could really help us. First of all, review the podcast on iTunes or the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media, Instagram at the Ferment Podcast and Twitter at FermentCast. Thanks for listening. See you next time.